Welcome to the NEET 2026 question paper video. This presentation is prepared by Dr.C.S.Sreenivasa Rao. Our first question asks, which of the following is included in the evil quartet of biodiversity loss? The correct answer is option 2, habitat loss and fragmentation, overexploitation, alien species invasions, and co-extinctions. Next, which one of the following is the site for active ribosomal RNA synthesis? The correct answer is option 1, the nucleolus. The nucleolus is essential for ribosome biogenesis. Let's match list I, phase of cell cycle, with list 2, activity. The correct match is A2, B3, CIV, DI. G1 is metabolic activity and growth. S is DNA synthesis. G2 is protein synthesis. M is cell division. Match list 1 with list 2 regarding productivity. The correct answer is option 2, A3, BICIV, D2. Productivity is the rate of biomass production. Net primary productivity is GPP minus respiration losses. Which statements are correct? Statements A, B, and D are correct. Deforestation for cultivation leads to habitat loss. Overexploitation caused the extinction of stellar sea cow and the passenger pigeon. Water hyacinth is an invasive species. The incorrect statements are C and E. Match the following terms related to decomposition. The correct answer is option 3, A3, BIV, C2, DI. Decomposition is breaking down complex matter. Detritus is dead remains. Mineralization is releasing inorganic nutrients. Humification is the accumulation of dark, amorphous colloidal substance. In which one of the following are the ovules not enclosed by an ovary wall and remain exposed? The correct answer is option 3, penis. Gymnosperms, like pinus, have naked ovules. In angiosperms, root hairs arise from which region of the root? The correct answer is option 4, the region of maturation. Root hairs are unicellular epidermal outgrowths that increase the surface area for absorption. Match list 1, placentation, with list 2, example. The correct answer is option 3, A2, BIV, CI, D3. Marginal is pea, axial is lemon, parietal is mustard, basal is marigold. Which one of the following is not a characteristic of plant cells in the phase of elongation? The answer is option 2, large conspicuous nuclei. During elongation, the nucleus becomes less conspicuous as the cell enlarges. Which statements are correct with reference to a transcription unit? All 5 statements A, B, C, D, and E are correct. The transcription unit has a promoter, structural gene, and terminator, and the promoter is towards the 5' end. Alpha helix is found in which level of protein structure? The answer is option 4, secondary structure. Alpha helix is a common type of secondary structure, stabilized by hydrogen bonds. Which statements are correct regarding amino acids? Statements A and C are correct. Amino acids are substituted methanes. Valine is a neutral amino acid. Serine is polar and uncharged, not aromatic. The main function of bulliform cells in grasses is to minimize water loss during water stress, which is option 3. These large, thin-walled cells lose turgor to cause the leaf to roll, thereby reducing water loss. Find the incorrect statements about photosynthesis. Statements A and D are incorrect. The water-splitting complex is associated with PS2, and Cran's anatomy is characteristic of C4 plants, not C3 plants. Thus, option 2 is the correct answer. Match list Y with list 2. The correct match is A3, BIV, CI, D2. Conjunctive tissue is between xylem and phloem. Casparian strips are endodermal cells with suberin. Subsidiary cells are specialized cells near guard cells. Starch sheath is endodermal cells rich in starch. Match list 1 with list 2 regarding biotechnology components. The correct match is A2, B3, CI, DIV. Genetically modified organism is Bt cotton. Thermostable DNA polymerase is from Thermus aquaticus. T. plasmid is found in Agrobacterium tumefaciens. PBR322 is a cloning vector in Escherichia coli. Heterophilous development in response to the environment is an example of which phenomenon? The correct answer is option 4, plasticity. This is the ability of a plant to produce different types of leaves based on environmental conditions. In racemose inflorescence, the flowers are born in an acropetal succession. This means older flowers are at the base and younger flowers are towards the apex, and the growth is unlimited. Option 3 is the correct answer. The disorder caused by the substitution of glutamic acid by valine at the 6th position of the beta-globin chain is sickle cell anemia. This point mutation causes the hemoglobin to polymerize under low oxygen conditions, leading to sickle-shaped red blood cells. To match list Y with list 2, we pair incomplete dominance with the inheritance of flower color in time antirrhinum species. Codominance is matched with ABO blood groups. Pleiotropy relates to phenylketonuria disease in humans, and polygenic inheritance corresponds to human skin color. The correct match is option 1. The correct developmental sequence for microsporogenesis is sporogenous tissue, followed by pollen mother cells, which divide to form microspore tetrads. These finally mature into pollen grains. Thus, the correct sequence is B, D, A, C. The correct sequence for DNA fingerprinting steps begins with isolation of DNA and its digestion by restriction endonucleases, followed by separation of DNA fragments by electrophoresis. Next, transferring fragments to synthetic membranes, hybridization using a labeled VNTR probe, and finally, detection by autoradiography. This corresponds to sequence A, E, C, B, D. Exploring molecular, genetic, and species-level diversity for products of economic importance is known as bioprospecting. It involves identifying and utilizing valuable biological resources for developing medicines, nutraceuticals, and industrial enzymes. In honeybees, an offspring from a fertilized egg is a female. An unfertilized egg develops as a male by parthenogenesis. Males have half the number of chromosomes and produce sperm by mitosis. Honeybees use the haplodiploid sex determination system. All statements except D are true, making A, B, C, and E the correct answer. The correct sequence of steps in each cycle of polymerase chain reaction, PCR, is denaturation, followed by annealing, and then extension. Denaturation separates the double-stranded DNA, annealing allows primers to bind, and extension synthesizes new DNA strands. Regarding DNA separation, isolation, and visualization, DNA cutting is done by molecular scissors, restriction enzymes. DNA fragments separate by size in agarose gel electrophoresis. However, separated DNA fragments must be stained, often with ethidium bromide and viewed under UV light, not visible light. Therefore, only statements A and B are correct. R.H. Whitaker's 5-kingdom classification primarily used cell structure, body organization, reproduction, and phylogenetic relationships as criteria. The presence of flagellum was not one of the main criteria used. Thus, the correct statements are A, B, D, and E. In angiosperms, the primary endosperm cell is a triploid cell. It is formed by the fusion of one sperm nucleus with the two polar nuclei, resulting in a chromosome number of 3N. Other options like the central cell, zygote, and synergids are not triploid. Correct statements regarding DNA packaging are that histones form an octamer, are basic proteins rich in lysine and arginine, and higher-level packaging requires non-histone chromosomal proteins. Histones are positively charged, not negatively, and DNA is negatively charged, wrapping around the histone octamer. A, C, and E are correct. In situ conservation involves protecting species in their natural habitats. Sacred groves are an example of in situ conservation. Wildlife safari parks, botanical gardens, and seed banks are examples of ex situ conservation, where species are maintained in artificial conditions outside their natural environment. In the lac operon, the Z gene codes for the enzyme beta-galactosidase. This enzyme hydrolyzes lactose into glucose and galactose. The Y gene codes for permease, and the A gene codes for transacetylase, matching the growth regulators to their function. 2,4-D is a herbicide. GA3 promotes amylase synthesis, used in the brewing industry. Kinetin promotes nutrient mobilization. ABA stimulates stomatal closure, especially under water stress. The correct match is option 3. The sequence of somatic hybridization steps starts with the isolation of single cells from two different varieties. This is followed by digestion of cell walls, then isolation of naked protoplasts. Next is the fusion of protoplasts to get a hybrid protoplast, and finally, growing the hybrid protoplast to form a new plant. The correct sequence is D, A, B, C, E. To find the respiratory quotient, RQ, for the given biomolecule, we use the ratio of carbon dioxide produced to O2 consumed. From the equation, the RQ is 102 divided by 145, which equals approximately 0.703. This value lies between 0.5 and 0.95, which is characteristic of fat metabolism. The sixth mass extinction, or Holocene extinction, differs from previous episodes because it is human-caused and occurring at an unprecedented rate. The present species extinction rates are 100 to 1,000 times faster than natural background rates, making option 2 the correct answer. We match list I with list 2. Trypsin is an enzyme. Morphine is an alkaloid. Concanavalin A is a lectin. Collagen is an intercellular ground substance. The correct option is 1, A3, BIV, C2, DI. The universal rules of binomial nomenclature state that the first word represents the genus, starting with a capital letter, and the second word is the specific epithet, starting with a small letter. Statement 3, which reverses these roles, is not true. Therefore, option 3 is the correct answer. The key enzyme required for carboxylation in the Calvin cycle is RUBP carboxylase oxygenase, or Rubisco. This enzyme catalyzes the fixation of carbon dioxide by RUBP to form 3-PGA. The WBC count is 8,000 per cubic millimeter. Eosinophils normally constitute 1 to 6% of the total WBCs, which is 80 to 480 per cubic millimeter. Lymphocytes are 20 to 40%, equating to 1,600 to 3,200 per cubic millimeter. Therefore, option 1 is the correct approximation. Bacillus thuringiensis produces cry proteins, which are insecticidal toxins. The gene cry-IAC codes for the toxin-controlling cotton bollworms, and cry-IAB codes for the toxin-controlling corn borers. Thus, the correct answer is option 3. Matching the drugs with their effects. Nicotine stimulates the adrenal gland. Morphine is an effective sedative and painkiller. Heroin is a depressant, slowing down body functions. Cocaine causes euphoria and increased energy. The correct match is option 2. Matching the disorders. Tetany is a wild muscle contraction due to low calcium. Arthritis is inflammation of joints. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder affecting the neuromuscular junction. Muscular dystrophy is progressive degeneration of skeletal muscle. The correct match is option 1. In male honeybees, or drones, haploid cells formed from unfertilized eggs divide mitotically to produce gametes. This is an exception, as most animals use meiosis for gamete production. The correct answer is option 1, male honeybees. The correct sequence for respiration steps starts with pulmonary ventilation, C, followed by gas diffusion across the alveolar membrane, B. Then, transport of gases by blood, E, diffusion between blood and tissues, A, and finally, cellular respiration, D. The correct order is C, B, E, A, D, which is option 4. Arranging the cell layers around the human ovum from outer to inner side. First is the corona radiata, followed by the zona pellucida, then the perivitelline space, and finally, the plasma membrane of the ovum. The correct sequence is C, A, B, D, which is option 2. Alpha-1 antitrypsin, obtained from transgenic animals like goats, is a protein used in augmentation therapy. It is used for the treatment of emphysema, where its deficiency can lead to the degradation of alveoli. The correct answer is option 2. Male frogs can be distinguished from female frogs by the presence of vocal sacs, used for croaking, and the copulatory pad on the first digit of the forelimbs, used for grasping. Therefore, B and D only is the correct answer, option 1. The Verhulst-Perl logistic population growth equation depicts population growth when environmental resistance increases as the population approaches the carrying capacity K. The equation is $frac dN dt equals Rn frac KNK dollar. This corresponds to option 1. Statements A, C, and E are correct regarding frog anatomy. Statement B is incorrect as frogs have 10 pairs of cranial nerves. Statement D is incorrect, as the hindbrain consists of the cerebellum and medulla oblongata, while the optic lobes are part of the midbrain. The correct option is 2. Erythroblastosis foetalis occurs when an Rh-negative mother carries an Rh-positive fetus. Prevention involves administering anti-Rh antibodies after the first Rh-positive delivery, not the second. Statements A and E are incorrect. The correct option is 1. In the human endoskeleton, the joint between vertebrae is cartilaginous. Humans have 7 cervical vertebrae, and the occipital bone articulates with the atlas vertebra. The human skull is dicondylic, and not all ribs are bicephalic. Thus, B, C, and E are correct, which is option 3. Matching the hormones with their functions, cortisol produces anti-inflammatory reactions. Aldosterone stimulates the reabsorption of sodium and water from the renal tubule. Cholecystokinin stimulates the secretion of pancreatic enzymes and bile juice. Progesterone stimulates the formation of alveoli in mammary glands. The correct option is 2. The life cycle of Plasmodium begins with the female mosquito injecting sporozoites E, which reach the liver D. They reproduce asexually in liver cells B, then in red blood cells A, and finally gametocytes develop in red blood cells C. The correct order is E, D, B, A, C. But since that is not an option, the closest key is C, D, B, A, C, which is option 2. We need to select the incorrect statements. Bilateral symmetry is characteristic of larval, not adult, echinoderms. Members of class Reptilia are poikilotherms and do not maintain a constant body temperature. Therefore, statements B and E are incorrect. The correct option is 1. The specific receptors for neurotransmitters in a synapse are located on the postsynaptic membrane. When neurotransmitters are released from the presynaptic terminal, they bind to these receptors to transmit the signal. Thus, option 1 is the correct answer. In muscle contraction, statements A, B, D, and E are correct. Statement C is incorrect because an increase in calcium ions, not inactivation of actin, leads to the unmasking of actin sites for cross-bridge formation. The correct option is 1, which includes A, B, D, and E only. Convergent evolution involves different species evolving similar traits independently. Forelimbs of whales and bats are modified mammalian forelimbs, sharing a common evolutionary origin. Therefore, this is an example of divergent evolution, not convergent evolution. The correct option is 2. The juxtaglomerular apparatus, or JGA, is a sensitive region formed by the distal convoluted tubule and the afferent renal arteriole of the same nephron. Specialized cells in these structures form the JGA. The correct answer is option 3. Which of the following floral formulas is the correct floral formula of the Solanaceae family? The correct formula is actinomorphic, bisexual, with 5 fused sepals, 5 fused petals, 5 epipetalous stamens, and a bicarpellary syncarpous ovary. Which one of the following types of pollination brings genetically different types of pollen grains to the stigma? Xenogamy is the transfer of pollen grains between flowers of different plants of the same species, bringing genetically different pollen grains to the stigma. Match list Y with list 2. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. The electron transport system occurs on the inner mitochondrial membrane. Accumulation of protons occurs in the intermembrane space, and the Krebs cycle occurs in the mitochondrial matrix. Insertion of a foreign DNA at the BAMHI site in an E. coli cloning vector PBR322 results in the loss of antibiotic resistance towards which antibiotic? The BAMHI site disrupts the tetracycline resistance gene, leading to the loss of tetracycline resistance. The 6th mutant codon of the beta-globin gene causing polymerization of hemoglobin and change in RBC shape is what? The correct codon is GUG, a mutation of GAG which substitutes glutamic acid with valine, causing sickle cell anemia. Choose the correct statement regarding gift to overcome infertility. Gift is the transfer of an ovum collected from a donor into the fallopian tube of another female who cannot produce ovum but can provide a suitable environment for fertilization and development. Which one of the following is an appropriate example of sexual deceit? The correct example is Ophrys and bumblebee. The Ophrys orchid mimics the female bumblebee to attract the male for pollination, a strategy based on illusion. Evolution of human appears parallel to the progressive development of brain and language skills. The sequence of their appearance is Ramapithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, and Homo sapiens. Match the embryonic development events with the correct weeks of pregnancy. Fetal movement starts and hair appears at 20 weeks. Limbs and digits develop at 8 weeks. External genital organs develop at 12 weeks. Body is covered with fine hair, and eyelids separate at 24 weeks. A group of researchers studied fish-like animals with a cartilaginous endoskeleton, ectoparasitic behavior with a circular sucking mouth, and 7 pairs of gill slits. These characteristics fit the Petromyzon species, a cyclostome fish. Select the correct statements about spermatogenesis. Secondary spermatocytes produce haploid spermatids through their second meiotic division. Spermatids transform into spermatozoa by spermiogenesis. What is the probability of having children with O blood group, where both mother and father are heterozygous for A and B blood group respectively? The probability is 25%, as a child with blood group O must inherit the recessive I allele from both heterozygous parents. Arrange the events in the renin-angiotensin mechanism in the correct order. The sequence is: fall in GFR, renin converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin II, vasoconstriction and aldosterone release, Na+ and water reabsorption, and increased blood pressure and GFR. Match the respiratory volumes with their capacities. Expiratory reserve volume is 1,000 to 1,100 ml. Residual volume is 1,100 to 1,200 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume is 2,500 to 3,000 milliliters. Tidal volume is 500 milliliters. Non-membrane bound cell organelles found in both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells are what? Ribosomes are non-membrane bound organelles and are found in all living cells, both prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Ecological pyramids generally invert for the pyramid of biomass in the sea. This is because producers in the aquatic ecosystem have low biomass but grow and reproduce very quickly. The flightless bird with four limbs modified as paddle-like structures for swimming is aptenidites, commonly known as the emperor penguin. Their wings are adapted as flippers for underwater propulsion. Let's match the bioactive molecules with their importance. Streptokinase is for the removal of blood clots. Statins are cholesterol-lowering agents. Lipases are for detergent formulations. And cyclosporin A is an immunosuppressive agent. Choosing the correct statements about cell organelles. Rough endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes. Both mitochondria and plastids have circular DNA. The cytoskeleton is a network of microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments. Mitochondria is a double membrane-bound structure. In grasshoppers, the 23 chromosome-bearing members are males, and the 24 chromosome-bearing members are females. This is due to the XOXX sex determination system, where males are XO and females are XX.